Hey everyone, how's it going? Welcome back to another Walking Dead Daryl Dixon video. So, I want to break down the early reviews. So there's early reviews out now for Daryl Dixon Season 2, and it's for the entire season as a whole. So I do want to break down a couple reviews here. I chose them based off of whether or not they were sort of positive or more neutral, or more negative. And so I want to sort of get into all the thoughts here regarding the season here, and yeah, I'll give my thoughts on that. So before going any further, make sure to be a subscriber if you do want to get all my Walking Dead content like this. The show is returning in 6 days now, so it's very, very close, and expect a lot more promo and a lot more trailers and all that coming out this week. I mean, obviously, I don't even know if we'll get a trailer, to be honest, at this point. I thought we would get a final trailer, but I mean, maybe today or tomorrow, but if nothing's out in the next day or two, I mean, we're a couple of days away at that point. I think they might just wait until the show premieres, but yeah, let's get into some of the reviews here. So I will say, I've been looking at all the reviews, and it's been hard to sort of choose which ones to talk about here, and I imagine over the next couple of days there will be more and more reviews, but it looks like overall it is more positive. It's about, I would say, an 8 out of 10. So I just wanted to add this in really quick because there's a lot of positive reviews in general, but I did focus a little bit more on some of the negative aspects in this video because a couple of reviews came out that were more negative, but there's actually overall way more positive reviews for Season 2, and it's because there's more reviews coming out now for Season 2. Like earlier there was only like 5 or 6 reviews. Now I feel like there's about 15 reviews out or more, and everything is very positive here, especially this review right here coming from winteriscoming.net, and the headline is Daryl Dixon Season 2 is an all-time high for The Walking Dead. And this review here says the introduction of Carol not only reignites her emotional connection with Daryl, but the writers explore her characters in a way we've never seen. Specifically, they dug into the trauma she suffered over a decade prior, thanks to the death of her daughter, Sophia. One of the most shocking events in Walking Dead history, the exploration of Carol's mental state and psyche explains why AMC subtitled the show The Book of Carol. It's as much her season as it is Daryl's, so many key events are witnessed through Carol's perspective. And then the review here goes into some parts that I found very interesting. It says, meanwhile, Daryl's story continues to develop. Season 1 felt like an introduction to a new world, and Season 2, things reach a boiling point. For instance, Marion Janae, obviously, who is Madame Janae, but I guess now they are really calling her by her, I guess, full name, or maybe they call her Marion mostly in Season 2. We'll have to wait and see. But yeah, her full name is Marion Janae. The article continues with, marches her army towards the nest, and even Losang, the leader of the Union of Hope, further imprints his authority. These important characters, especially Janae, are all given a chance to grow and develop. There's a fantastic flashback scene going back to Outbreak Day, chronicling how Janae survived, much like Isabelle's origin story in Season 1. And this one aspect here, I know a lot of fans were really wondering about, but the article says, Norman Reedus is on record for saying the season finale is the single best hour of The Walking Dead ever created. Even though I think there's better episodes out there, I'm inclined to call the entire season an all-time high for the franchise. It's that good. The Walking Dead has always been, at its core, a show about family and companionship. From the very first episode, it was Rick Grimes trying to find his family in a world gone mad. In The Ones Who Live, Rick was trying to make his way back home to his daughter Judith and to Michonne. Daryl Dixon Season 2, The Book of Carol, continues that theme of family and companionship, building on the solid foundation of Season 1. It's already one of my all-time favorite seasons from the entire franchise. I'm left desperate for Season 3, which, as we know, takes the saga to sunny Spain. And so, really incredible review here, and again, I'm seeing a lot more positive reviews out there like this, and so for the rest of the video, I do focus on some of the negative aspects to it, because at first, that's really all there was, but again, there is still a lot more positive to it, and yeah, there's a lot to break down that I'll talk about in videos throughout the week. And I will say, based off of previous shows and doing early reviews and all of that, in the past, they've mostly done like the first 3 episodes, or like the premiere, or like 2 episodes or something like that. But for Daryl Dixon Season 2, they actually let all the early reviewers watch the entire season, which is 6 episodes. And so I imagine just based off of that, you might get more negative reviews because your expectations aren't maybe necessarily met because you watched the entire season and that they never got to this point or whatever. Whereas I think if you watch the first 2 or 3 episodes and it ends on a very exciting cliffhanger, then you might focus a lot more on the positive, even if there is going to be sort of a downside to the story afterwards, right? Like maybe the cliffhanger was exciting, but the next episode it's kind of like, right? So I would say, if anything, this is probably the most accurate in terms of reviews, because I look at The Ones Who Live, and honestly, everyone was praising the show a lot, but I think if everyone watched the entire season and you saw how The Ones Who Live ended, I think a lot of people would say that, it wasn't as good as what people were saying overall, because I think the finale definitely hurt a lot of the story. But focusing on Daryl Dixon season 2 and getting into some of the reviews here, I do want to focus on a review done by the Nocturnal here. So remember, I have some reviews that are more positive, and then reviews that are more neutral, and then reviews that are more negative. Well, I guess I have like 3 or 4 reviews here anyways. But yeah, let's get to the first one here. So this one here is from the Nocturnal. And again, I'll leave a link down below to every single article. You can go check out the reviews. I mean, they went into everything a lot here in depth, and so I'm not going to obviously get into everything. Go check out the articles if you do want to, read more reviews and whatnot about the season. And yeah, I just want to talk about a couple of things here. And so in this review here, the review definitely praises the episode quite a bit here. And I do want to get into this one part here that I find very, very interesting. So apparently the second and the fourth episodes are standouts for the season. And according to this article, on the fourth, there is an action sequence featuring continuous uninterrupted camera shots that involve Daryl. And it surprised me that no camera cuts were required in this sequence. And so that's exciting in terms of storytelling, because you do want things like that in general. And I always notice that whenever there's like cuts and stuff in a scene, if there is a continuous camera shot, like those are honestly one of the best scenes. And I feel like it depends on how the scene plays out here, but I wonder if that was like inspiration from like Daredevil and all of that, right? Because people really like scenes like that. So I do wonder if there was some inspiration there. But the article also talks about the fact that, and I quote, "In the first season, Isabelle was my favorite character, but this season I prefer Marion, as in obviously Marion Janae. The character development gave her new layers that made me care for the character as we learned more about what she was doing prior to the outbreak, why she wanted to lead, and so on. However, it is not a redemption arc at all. Instead, it emphasizes the why rather than the how in place of one-dimensional villain characters. Also, remember those drug-injected walkers? We get a lot more of it this season, as well as the motive behind it. So that's really exciting. And I've been seeing that consistently throughout all of the reviews here, is Madame Janae seems to become a very exciting character here in season 2. And so Isabelle, I guess, isn't going to be that much of a focus this season. I feel like she is going to die. I'm just going to say that. I mean, I've been saying it in my last couple of videos here, but based off of the early reviews here, it just feels like that is likely what's going to happen, because I've seen a lot of, comments about the fact that like you wish that certain characters could have met, or not necessarily met, but you just wish certain characters were around. But it just seemed like it was always going to be Daryl with Isabelle, or it was going to be Daryl with Carol. And so I don't know, maybe, Carol and Isabelle do meet, but I do wonder though if Isabelle actually does just die. And it's one of those things where it's kind of frustrating, because the story could have benefited a lot from having Carol, Isabelle, and Daryl around. And I honestly, I do agree with that, because to me, Isabelle was a really amazing character in the very first season. And even if this season she doesn't have the biggest moments, I feel like it's still like, again, in season 3, you could have given her, a bigger story if she obviously doesn't die. I'm assuming that she's going to die this season, but it's definitely unfortunate. And I do wonder if the direction of just taking Daryl and Carol around, traveling everywhere, meeting characters, and just like leaving characters behind is even the right direction. I don't know if that's where they're going here with season 2. I really have no idea. Maybe it ends in a way where certain characters are going with Daryl and Carol, but I'm just saying, if that is the focus, it depends on how they do it. Of course, it really depends on that, but that I definitely am not a fan of. But yes, this article here from the Nocturnal is praising The Walking Dead Daryl Dixon season 2 and says it's a massive improvement over season 1. That's the headline to the article. So again, I'll leave a link down below to this article. So yeah, really great stuff. I'm definitely, reading this article. I'm really, really excited about season 2. I cannot wait. Now, I want to get into IGN's review, because IGN reviewed The Walking Dead Daryl Dixon Season 2, and their rating was a 7 out of 10. So just to get into, I guess, the verdict part here and what they're saying about The Walking Dead Daryl Dixon Season 2, taking the Daryl Dixon series and splitting it halvesies with Carol means that a few Season 1 elements had to peel away. That sometimes feels too forced, but on the whole, Carol arriving in France is meant to throw a wrench in Daryl's new life, even as it stands on the precipice of crumbling on its own. The Book of Carol, despite the story's occasionally clunky reshaping, is still a potent, poignant reunion between two Walking Dead favorites. The action is great, the seasonal resolution works, and the final sequence offers clever catharsis. So, yeah, judging based off of that, I mean, they're saying it's generally, like, it's a good season. Like you'll enjoy it, and I guess because Carol is there. And the one thing that they focused on in here, actually, and I've seen that being a negative review, which I don't know if I could necessarily agree with. It depends on how they do it. I mean, I guess I understand it, but it's the fact that certain things feel very forced, and a lot of it is the talk of Sophia. I've seen that, I don't know if it's necessarily in this review, but I've seen it in other reviews where there's a lot of discussion about the fact that Carol feeling all this trauma and feeling all of what she's feeling after Sophia's death all of these years later is feeling too forced. And I guess I do understand how it did just sort of come out of nowhere, after many, many years on the show. She never really, I guess felt the loss of Sophia that much, or at least we never really necessarily saw that. And so now in the spinoffs, I mean, obviously they can explore that, but I think that's kind of the point of it. That's why, to me, when I look at that criticism, I'm like, I don't know if that's necessarily a criticism. Like, if you just look at The Walking Dead, she mourned Sophia's death, throughout season 2, like afterwards, but she quickly went into a different state of mind where she was being very protective of everybody and really just focused on survival, trying to teach everybody how to survive and everything, right? And I feel like throughout the years and then throughout that series, she's overall, I think, kind of avoided how she felt about it. And I think in this season here, with Daryl going missing and then just starting to feel those emotions and whatnot, like, I totally get it. I think that it works. I think it is fine. I think maybe, the criticism is more on the fact that it is only 6 episodes. Maybe if it was 8 episodes or 10 episodes, you could have focused a little bit more on developing, why those feelings are coming back up, this and that. Like, maybe that was the better choice here, but I've seen that criticism quite a bit. The one thing IGN does say here, though, is that the change to Lo Sang's demeanor feels forced, and so to balance it out, Janae becomes more complex and nicely layered, as they say. And so to me, I don't know if Lo Sang's change in behavior, him becoming more of a villain or whatnot, is necessarily that different. Like, if you look at the season 1 finale, we barely saw anything with Lo Sang. Like, he seemed very happy, but obviously if you're just first meeting somebody, it's going to seem like that, right? Like, things are just going to be really good until you actually start to, you're there for a bit, and then you start to really see somebody. And so I think that's just all that was. And so to me, that doesn't necessarily feel forced, but I do want to get into some negative reviews here about the show. And this one here comes from Games Radar, who rated the show actually 2 out of 5 stars. And so that's like, what, 4 out of 10? And so that is not a great review or rating or anything for Daryl Dixon Season 2, according to Games Radar. And their headline here says, frustrating follow-up lacks the freshness of the far superior first season. So again, a really crazy change of opinion here, right? Because obviously this one here is a lot more negative, whereas we saw other reviews that were saying that the season was actually way better than the first one. This one quote right here says, more action-packed than his predecessor, Daryl Dixon Season 2 feels more like old school Walking Dead, and not necessarily in a good way. It's unfocused, racing through the story arcs as it tries to juggle too many characters, much like the main show's last few seasons, which was arguably the reason why the more streamlined spinoffs were greenlit in the first place. And so that one part right there, I guess, has me a bit worried that it is going to feel like, that they are rushing through story arcs, because it is only like 6 episodes. And again, that's why I'm so happy Dead City is going to be 8 episodes, I believe. Daryl Dixon Season 3, I think, is still going to be 6 episodes, though they could change that because they are filming right now. I think that is definitely something that I've noticed in the spinoff so far. 6 episodes is not enough. Like, you cannot do 6 episodes to tell a Walking Dead story because you are rushing so much of the story. Like, The Walking Dead has a slower pace, I would say, just in general, right? And if you're rushing everything so fast where you can't really focus, and spend time with characters and build up things just like how you've always done, story build up, everything's going to feel rushed and you're not going to feel that connected with the characters. Like, that's the one thing that's sort of special about The Walking Dead. Even though a lot of people do complain about it, like, that is what makes the show really good, is those episodes where nothing is really happening, but you're just focusing on that conversation. Certain things will happen in the episode, but you'll remember it later on when there's a big reveal or something happens, because then you look back and you're like, oh, that was the build up for that moment. And so for 6 episodes, you're constantly having to, end the story here, or you're rushing through this and that, right? So this one part of the review here says, okay, so it's not all bad. There's a fantastically staged set piece in which the Mont Saint Michel, I don't know if I'm saying that right, comes under siege, leading Daryl, Isabelle, Laurent, and Falou to split up and navigate the fortress's impressive grounds as they ward off enemies with bows and arrows. The whole thing gives off a Game of Thrones vibe that's different from the battle sequences we've seen before, and it's thrilling. there's a fun sequence as well that sees Daryl, Carol, and Co. attacked by a bunch of bioluminescent zombies, which are a cool upgrade on last year's burner ones. And so that's a really interesting part to this, first of all. The bioluminescent zombies, that's different from the super walkers, right? I'm pretty sure that's the walkers that are in that, whatever that is, underground facility, right? And so I wonder how much that plays a role. We saw in one of the early reviews that we are going to see a lot more, I guess, the reasonings behind why the variant walkers are being made and everything. And so I do wonder what the connection here with all of this is going to be. But this review ends off here saying, if The Walking Dead Daryl Dixon, The Book of Carol had been the spinoff's first outing, it undoubtedly would have gone down a lot smoother. It is watchable, and Carol fans are sure to love seeing the besties back together again, but it's frustrating to see certain storylines and characters not given a fair run come at the cost of that. Rather than continuing to broaden the series' possibilities and offering up a new perspective, Daryl Dixon Season 2 settles for something familiar. So I feel like maybe I could understand this review if, they do kill off Isabelle, if it's literally just like it ends in a way where it's basically The Walking Dead again, like Daryl and Carol are together, trying to go back to America or something, everyone else is gone, and it's just like everything we built up in the last 2 seasons is completely gone, then I totally understand that review. I would feel disappointed with the season. Again, it depends on how they do it all, though, because if they end the arc in a way that makes sense, that's fine. I'm okay with the France storyline ending and all of that. I just hope that there's characters around still with Daryl and Carol, going into season 3, because that's kind of frustrating to be like, oh wow, like there's no one left. But again, it depends on how they do everything, right? And so, yeah, that's one thing that has me concerned about the story overall. But yeah, I do want to talk about this last review here, and this is from comicbook.com. This is a very positive review, actually. It's a 4.5 out of 5 stars, so that's like a 9 out of 10. And again, I have been focusing a lot on the negative and whatnot, and focusing on like certain things like that, but there is going to be positives to this season. There's going to be a lot of, excitement there. I think with every series or every season we've ever watched of The Walking Dead, there's always criticisms. There's always like, oh, this part was sort of disappointing, or this part was exciting. And I think that's what you should really keep in mind, because this was the same with The Ones Who Live. There were negative reviews about the show, and also with the previous seasons, there were negative reviews as well. A lot of people didn't like Daryl Dixon season 1, Dead City season 1, The Ones Who Live season 1, or if that's the only season, whatever. The one thing that I do like here is it actually says, and I'll quote here, it's a spoiler to reveal when Daryl and Carol reunite over the course of the 6-episode season, but rest assured that fans will be satisfied and teary-eyed when the long-awaited Carol reunion finally happens in the most emotional scene of the season. So that to me is really interesting, the fact that Daryl and Carol's reunion is actually that emotional, and I'm interested in how they're going to build that up, because for me personally, it doesn't really feel that emotional. Like, I feel like when they see each other, it's just gonna be like, oh hey, because they haven't really been apart for that long. Maybe it's been a couple of months, so it really hasn't been the craziest, but I guess it's more of what they're going through both like emotionally that sort of builds a lot of that up, right? But the article ends here with, this is an adrenalized action heavy season that forgoes much of the religious undercurrent of the more measured and faith-based first season, but its balanced mix of heartfelt drama and heart-pounding zombie action means Daryl Dixon is more epic than ever. Based off of the reviews here, honestly, I do think I'm going to really, really enjoy season 2 here. I do think it's likely going to be, I think, an upgrade or a big improvement, I guess, over season 1. But I do think some of the concerns I'm going to have is regarding Isabelle and the overall story there. But it does seem like Madame Janae becomes a very, very likable character. So maybe you don't really notice it too much. Maybe in this season, Isabelle's not really that noticeable, which I guess would be a criticism because she was such a big character in season 1. But it depends on how they handle Madame Janae and her storyline. So we'll see where that goes there. But if it ends up, in a place where Madame Janae is like the star of the season, I think that'd be absolutely incredible, because she's the villain and that's exactly what you want, right? Like, I would prefer her to be like the star of the season over Isabelle, just because Madame Janae is like the villain. And so, yeah, based off of all these reviews here, again, there's some that are very negative, some that are more mixed, and I think most of them are positive, and a lot of the negatives seem to be more focused on the fact that it's really just the same old Walking Dead. So you're sort of criticizing the show for what it's always sort of done. And I guess I do kind of get that. There's been a lot of frustrations I've seen anyways when it comes to, I guess the showrunner, David Isabelle. A lot of fans aren't, I guess, a fan of him being the showrunner anymore. And I think a lot of it is because of his comments on Daryl and Carol. So it's interesting. I'll just say that, I think this season definitely is going to be, be a really interesting season to watch. Everything overall is sounding really good, and I think a lot of the negatives they're focusing on are pretty explainable, or things that I think have always just sort of happened throughout The Walking Dead's history. Again, like The Ones Who Live was rushed. We'll have to wait and see, right? Like, I think The Ones Who Live, I think that finale was rushed really, really bad. I don't think this season's going to be that. I mean, based off a lot of the positive reviews, no one is saying that it's rushed like that. A lot of people are saying it's very well paced, and yeah, but I'm gonna leave it here. Definitely post all your thoughts down below. Hope you all enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one.